There are nearly 20,000 murders annually in the United States.
Perhaps it's the weather, but the Pacific Northwest has become the notorious home of serial killers and bizarre crimes.
We're here to discuss those murders,
To try to understand the motives,
respect and remember the victims.
and explore the humanity of it all.
I'm Emily Rowney.
And I'm Alisha Holland.
And this is Murder in the Rain. Dan and Patty Gallagher sat on a porch of their waterside condo enjoying a drink in the very early hours of May 23, 2009. The Friday night before, the sky above the Willamette Valley was lit up with fireworks, part of the opening ceremony for the annual Rose Festival, an Oregon tradition that has taken place for over 100 years. It wasn't unheard of for the raucous partiers occupying the Selwood neighborhood to toss items over the bridge and into the water near the Gallagher's home. So when Dan and Patty heard a splash below the bridge, it's likely it was dismissed as excited festival goers extending their fun into the night. But the sounds that shortly followed likely haunt them to this day. Moments after the routine splash, an urgent scream filled their ears. A child's voice pleading, "Help me," jarred them into action. While the Gallaghers raced to grab flashlights, search the water for them, and dial 911, another neighbor also heard the disturbing calls for help. David Hagg lived on a floating home not far from the bridge. After 1:30 in the morning, David and his friend Cheryl Robb jumped into their boat and searched for the source of the screams. About 20 minutes later, they located a young girl fighting to stay afloat in the water. David jumped in and grabbed the girl, pulling her to the safety of the boat. He screamed out to Cheryl, "My God, there's another one." Another child, smaller than the first, was located nearby, but was not moving. They grabbed his lifeless body, pulled him into the boat, and raced to the yacht club on the eastern shore. It was there they were met by police and rescue boats who were also searching the waters for the sources of the screams that triggered dozens of 911 calls. Police and concerned citizens were aghast at the sight before them. One young girl hurt and scared, and another young boy dead after police unsuccessfully administered CPR. Who were these children? How did this happen? And where are their parents? A few miles away from the bridge, a young boy named Gavin was staying with his grandparents in Milwaukee, a town downriver from the Selwood neighborhood. Earlier in the evening, he didn't want to go with his mother when she came to pick up his younger half-siblings for their scheduled visitation. A visitation that didn't apply to him as his father had sole custody. Instead, he stayed home with his grandparents, Kathy and Mike Stott. He had trouble sleeping that night, and around midnight, he woke his grandparents because he found it very strange that his mother hadn't returned home with his siblings. Shortly after, Kathy began calling her daughter Amanda. There were no answers to her calls. Around 1:30 a.m., Kathy called Jason Smith, the children's father, to see if he had spoken to his ex, Amanda. He said she had called him a few minutes prior, but he didn't answer. This is when everyone grew concerned. Amanda Stott Smith had a history of drunk driving, even when her kids were in the car with her. She had also had a rough few months, with her depression severely impacting her daily life. Now Amanda's family feared the worst. She hadn't brought the children back, she's not answering her mother's calls, and she isn't at home, and no one has spoken to her since she picked up the kids. Then, about an hour after speaking to Amanda's mother, Kathy, Jason receives a phone call from Amanda, where she says, "Help me." When he responds by asking if the kids are okay, she says, "Why have you taken my joy away?" And the call ends. At this point, Jason's mother, Christine Duncan, calls 911 to file a missing person report for each of the children. She told police that she felt strongly the kids were in immediate danger, and around 3 a.m., Jason also spoke to the police. He confirmed that he didn't know where the children were and they had been with their mother that night, but she did not return them home to her parents' house as they had previously agreed on. In the early hours of Saturday morning, reports of 2 children found in the river occupied the local news channels. Jason again called police to tell him the kids in the river could be his kids that he's desperately looking for. To the family's horror, it was confirmed that the kids found in the river were Trinity and Eldon Smith, Jason and Amanda's 2 youngest children. Jason is now confronted with the facts that 7-year-old Trinity is alive but in the hospital receiving care for a broken sternum, while his 4-year-old son Eldon drowned to death. Officers then begin the hunt for the children's mother, hoping to get insights on how the children ended up abandoned in the Willamette River. By 10:25 a.m. that same day, police located a beat-up 1991 blue Audi, matching the description of the car Amanda drove, as well as the description witnesses noted was parked on the Selwood Bridge moments before residents began calling 911. Amanda was spotted in her car, cigarette in hand, parked on the 9th floor of a parking garage in downtown Portland. She tried to run and possibly jump off of the garage, but police officer Wade Greaves grabbed her and she was arrested. At the police station, Amanda confirmed what everyone dreaded to hear, that she was the reason her children were in the water. She had dropped them one at a time from the bridge into the cold water nearly 90 feet below. She explained that she had intended to take the kids to see fireworks Friday night, and after neglecting to find a parking spot, they watched the fireworks from the car while she drove around the city. Eventually, the kids fell asleep in the back of the car. She parked the car in the narrow lanes of the Selwood Bridge and carried 7-year-old Trinity from the side of the car to the side of the bridge and dropped her body into the water while she was still asleep. She then moved to grab Eldon, who at this time awoke. As she lifted him over the ledge, he asked, "Did you just put her into the water or something?" And then she dropped him too. A story like this might leave you thinking, what kind of monster can drop her own children off the bridge into the dark waters, knowing perfectly well they're likely to die? I know that's my first thought. And to me, a parent hurting their child physically, sexually, emotionally is one of the most terrible things I can think of. And while it's easy to write her off as crazy or a sociopath, we have to explore what causes people to do these kinds of things. We've talked about filicide before. Filicide is the act in which a parent kills their own child. And according to the FBI, in the US, an estimated 500 children are killed by their parents each year. Of developed nations, the United States has the highest rate of child murder.
Not surprising.
It's actually surprising to me if you think of like the child armies of Africa and like the chaos in South America, that's actually quite terrible. That we have the highest rate.
I mean, I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm not asking for a medal.
No, I'm not saying it's a good thing either. I'm just saying I was actually surprised by that.
But then it's like, imagine kids that are born that, people don't go to the hospital to report.
Oh, yeah, we're going to talk about that, girl. Roughly 2.5% of all homicide arrests in the U.S. are for parents who killed their kids, with roughly 90% of these being biological parents.
And the other 10 being step, obviously.
Adoptive.
Oh, okay.
Although we do know this recent case of the Hart family who were adoptive,
Right,
which
yeah.
I don't know if we're going to cover. Maybe we will. We'll see.
Yeah, it's possible.
So when looking at the fathers who kill, statistics typically point them being targeting older children. They are usually out of work, separating from their partner, and under the influence of drugs and alcohol. Mothers who kill are often teen mothers, so it's common that they're targeting young children, infants, newborns. They have little education, they're typically single, and they've had little prenatal care. So in your mind, you can kind of picture this being that stereotypical teen mom at the prom, having the baby and throwing it away.
Right.
According to Philip Resnick, a professor of psychiatry, filicide can be broken into different groups based on the motives. So the first is altruistic, and this is described as an act of love rather than a product of like a reactive state like anger. So this can be broken down further into paired with suicide. So a parent is already planning to do away with themselves.
Like a Josh Powell situation.
Well, in this scenario, it's more like I'm going to kill myself, so I might as well take my kids because they can't possibly live without me.
Right.
Like, what kind of life would it be without mommy?
Right.
And then the other side of it is to prevent suffering. So really sick kids, for instance, whether it's real or imagined, these parents are doing away with the kids to do them a favor. So a very famous case that kind of falls into that category is Andrea Yates.
Yes.
She drowned all 5 of her children in a bathtub, one at a time, youngest
that was
to
Texas,
oldest.
right?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, I believe so. So basically her reasoning was they're controlled by Satan and there's no possible way they're going to grow up and not be homosexuals, prostitutes,
Right.
killers. So she figured it's my duty to put them out.
Mixed with some serious postpartum situations.
Yes, but that's a factor in all of these scenarios. So that's just like a great one to outline. Not great, but you know what I mean. It outlines that category.
Right.
So the next category is fatal maltreatment or battered child syndrome. And this is typically based off of a violent outburst. So we see this a lot with shaken baby syndrome. The child won't stop crying. Daddy shakes it. Brain goes into mush and they die. Unwanted child, we talked about earlier and in the prom scenario. This is super common in newborns. So a young mother gives birth to the child, doesn't want it or didn't even know she was in a habit, and gets rid of it. This also is seen in Diane Downs. You know, the kids were seen as an obstacle for her relationship with her lover, so she put him out of the way. And then the last is spousal revenge. This is when a parent kills their children to punish the other parent. And this is what police thought happened with Amanda Jo Stott-Smith. Killing children is a horrendous act, and the thought that a person could kill their own children is unimaginable to most people. Our children are conditioned to feel safe with their parents, to trust them completely and totally blindly. Mothers are supposed to be a natural parent. It's in our DNA. Mothers love their children despite all else. They're superheroes who can work full-time jobs, cook nutritious dinner, help with school projects, and read bedtime stories without complaint, right? Mothers are held to the highest standard, and as humans, we struggle to understand what would drive a mother to kill her own flesh and blood. We dub these women monsters. I did just a few episodes ago when describing Diane Downs. Her motive was selfish, and I stand by that opinion. But something about Amanda speaks to something different. I don't think she was a sociopath, and I think we should explore what drove her to do this. A local Oregon journalist, Nancy Rommelman, published a book last year called To the Bridge, A True Story of Motherhood and Murder. In this book, she dives deep into the story and the history of the family. Nancy was one of the first people who reported on this case. She was actually there at Amanda's arraignment and went to the following trial. She tried over and over to interview the family and had some success doing so. She wrote the book to explore Amanda's motives. And I read the book, and I have to say it's very well written. And while you can see her opinion at times, she does a really good job exploring multiple perspectives of what happened. And I give her props to seeing that there was more to the story than just a headline that a mother dropped her
Not just
kids.
a witch hunt.
Exactly. So she made it her mission to follow up and write the story. So let's talk a little bit about Amanda. Amanda Stott was born June 5th, 1977. A typical teen girl, she made friends easily, she did well at school, and she eventually ended up attending George Fox University, a Christian college in Newberg, Oregon, about an hour southwest from Portland. While in college, Amanda lived with her friends April and Tiffany. Amanda seemed to catch the attention of many guys on campus, probably because of her exotic good looks. She was part Filipino on her father's side, and for her finely honed skill set of flirting. So dating came really easily for her. Barely into college, Amanda got pregnant with Gavin, and she told her friend Tiffany that it was actually her first time ever having sex, though nobody really knows whether to believe that because she has a history of kind of spinning tells, telling lies. So Nathan, the father, was a guy she had met a few times, but he was just a casual acquaintance, not really in the picture. He had intended to join the military, so she didn't really see a future there and planned to raise Gavin herself. It was a group effort. Amanda relied heavily on food stamps and the kind nature of her girlfriends to raise Gavin in a loving home. While her friends would reflect on if it happened to them, their families would be really involved. They didn't think Amanda really had that, so they were happy to step in and help out. Her friends do reflect on Amanda being a little bit irresponsible. She would often go out and just not come back and just expect her friends to take care of her baby.
Oh, nice.
So by her junior year, Amanda was pregnant again. This time, the father was Shane Cook, a guy who had sold Amanda and her friends pot on occasion. So, she had
He
the
was
hookup.
dealing more than weed.
You know what I mean? Amanda and Shane were engaged. Amanda's grandmother, Jackie, recounts that she wasn't sure about Shane, that Amanda wasn't sure about Shane and their future together because he wasn't financially stable, and she made it very clear she was looking for someone with money.
Wait, the college pot dealer wasn't financially stable?
He must not have been that great at it. Every pot dealer I knew was always, wallet of cash.
Right.
Before Amanda and Shane could marry, he committed suicide in the woods.
Yikes. Did it say before or after the kid was born?
Oh, it was while she was pregnant, so before it was born. So we don't really know exactly what happened, and I tried to look into this, but I think he was from out of town, so I couldn't find any record. But the rumors on campus were there were two possible scenarios. He either drove to the woods and took a bottle of horse tranquilizers in his car and died. But then the other rumor was that he actually ran a tube from the tailpipe into the car and died of carbon monoxide poisoning.
That seems more likely. I feel like horse tranquilizers.
They're hard to actually get, but I don't know about.
But he was a drug dealer.
That's true, but they are very hard to get. Like, you have to know a vet. But actually, you could probably order them online. We should look into that.
Online wasn't around when
in the early 2000s. Yes,
I mean,
it was.
not.
I was downloading BitTorrents or whatever.
Not horse tranquilizer usable.
I'll ask my mom. I'll ask my mom.
I just
She'll
don't
know.
think the dark web was like immediate.
You don't need to be on the dark web. People order horse tranquilizers all the time for the horses.
I feel like you know a lot about this.
My mom is a horse trainer.
But for real.
Okay. I was like, wow, this is your level of
It's
knowledge.
not as strict on the medications as you'd think. You can get them from other countries.
So
Anyway,
she's pregnant.
She's pregnant.
And the baby daddy / fiance kills himself.
So she's very pregnant and has a very dead fiance. But now this new love interest, Jason Smith, comes into play. And there's talk that he was also a drug dealer. Jason's from a well-off family, and he's already done multiple stints in rehab at this time. So he's had issues since being around 16, I guess you'd say. So probably in and out at least twice since then.
So a perfect storm of
It really is.
a girl
But
going through a crisis. And
well, and he saunters in, and he's giving Amanda jewelry, and he drives a nice car, and he's wearing nice clothes. So he's really painting a picture of this wealthy potential suitor, and she is eating it up. She thinks the world revolves around this guy.
also, I mean, this is for a guy.
A pregnant woman. Yeah,
Like,
that pregnant.
Like, I'm not saying like pregnant women can't date or whatever, but it's like, what's the
Well,
draw for him?
I'm wondering.
Makes me think, did they know each other before?
That's what I'm saying. I'm wondering if they were like friends or hooking up before, and
And maybe the boyfriend found out that the baby wasn't going to be his.
Pretty sure the baby was his. But it's interesting because, I mean, not a lot of guys are going to walk in with like a 7-month-long pregnant woman and pick right up and be
like,
baby
I
daddy.
can't wait to give you jewelry and things.
Uh-huh.
Like, what?
Yeah, so I mean,
red flag.
It is a red flag, and it was a red flag to everyone. But so they go through the whole pregnancy. She has the baby, and she does put this baby up for adoption.
Okay.
So it goes, thank God, to another home, and she's now left to date Jason alone. But she has Gavin, so he steps in as Gavin's father, really. He makes
a pregnant single mother.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what's this guy's deal?
So while they're together, their family and friends aren't really supportive. Jason's mother actually accuses Amanda of just sucking his trust fund dry. He went from having about $167,000 to nothing within a couple of years. They were just blowing thousands left and right. He was buying her jewelry all the time, and her friends were very, very clear that they thought that's the only reason she was in it, is that he was giving her the money and the attention that she needed. So from June 2000 to May 2001, the police were called at least 3 times to their home. So it was usually claims of assault. They were both arrested on multiple occasions. There was accusations of menacing, of vandalizing cars. So they both were like pointing fingers at each other.
Great.
Amanda's popping the tires in his car, and he's saying, no, she actually did that to try and get me in trouble. So the cops are just like head spinnings. But also at this time, they decide it's the perfect time to get married.
Well, yeah.
So they jet off to
Bonnie
Hawaii.
and Clyde, baby.
Yeah, they jet off to Hawaii with Gavin. They get married. They come back. Again, police are still getting involved. And this time it includes Gavin. So Jason gets busted for leaving Gavin in his car at 4 years old. He leaves him in the car. Police come, and they're reporting the kid is sweating. He's confused and lethargic. And at one point, he even collapses to the ground. And I don't know how, but there doesn't seem to be anything that happened. No repercussions from this. But that is a crazy red flag to me.
Right.
Like, he's clearly doing drugs, dealing drugs. There are claims that when he buys Amanda jewelry, it suddenly goes missing. So like he has money and then he doesn't. So he takes her jewelry and sells it, buys her more. So friends are like, yeah, this dude is doing drugs. and I couldn't find any confirmation of this other than Nancy Rommelman's book, but there was a suggestion that he actually took Gavin to Mexico and smuggled drugs in his diaper on the way back. So like clearly issues with drugs, whether doing them and selling them, and using his family in the mix is just kind of disturbing. After getting married, Jason and Amanda had 2 children together, Trinity, born around 2002, Eldon, born in 2005. Close friends of the family often reflected on Amanda's issues with heavy drinking, and she also had a very clear eating disorder. Jason was verbally abusive, bossing her around cruelly, calling her names. There's even a story that he handed her a pair of size 2 pants and was like, fit into these. So she's constantly hurting herself to lose weight. Her friend April actually visited them in Hawaii and noted that her clothes were falling off of her. She's just drunk all the time, not really eating, kind of out of it. The kids are like left to their own devices. So there's this story in the book about a dinner party. So Amanda and Jason moved back from Hawaii into Portland, and they have Jason's good friend Ryan over and his girlfriend Sarah. And they're having this dinner, and this is Sarah's like first time meeting them, and Amanda's wasted, just pulling vodka from the bottle. Jason's calling her names, berating her for the food not being good. Trinity won't eat it, so he takes her upstairs and gives her a spanking. She won't eat it again. He does it again. And Sarah's like a teacher and just like horrified by this. And then they're not putting the kids to bed. It's like 10:30 at night, and little Eldon is running around. So she ends up putting them to bed, reading them a story, and kindly says to Amanda, like, if you want some books on, dealing with difficult children, like helping her.
Right.
And Amanda seems open to it, but she said she goes in and out of this like personality of being just not interested in her help, but then wanting her help. So it's very clear there's some weird things going on with Amanda. There's definitely some child abuse, I think, could be said happening in this household.
Well, neglect for sure.
Neglect, endangering a child because both parties at some point were driving under the influence, as well as physical abuse. So in 2003, Gavin, who is 6, had DHS come to the house. So somebody had called and said there were signs of abuse on his body. And there are thoughts that it might have been Amanda who called. CPS did visit, and the social worker noted that he had excessive bruising on his legs. But Gavin told the worker he couldn't remember how it happened, but his parents definitely didn't do it. And just nothing came of it.
Oh, well, in that case.
I know. They're
case
all
closed.
Okay, 6-year-old. Like, cool. Jason eventually left Amanda on her 31st birthday, June 5th, 2008. This, I think, really illuminates Amanda's life at that point. Like, he left her on her birthday.
Right.
That's, it couldn't be the day after, couldn't be the day before.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So after he left, Amanda did go on welfare to help support the family. I think she was working part-time at that point, just not enough to have 3 children in a rental home in Tualatin by herself. His mom did help out time to time, so I don't want to say they were like leaving her totally high and dry. But after leaving Amanda, Jason went to his friend Ryan's house to stay. So Ryan, at this point, I think he was married to Sarah now. While Ryan was happy to help, he knew Jason had problems with drugs, and he wasn't sure how long he could really have him living with them because of Sarah. She is in the education business. Like, that's not cool to have a drug addict living with you. Yeah,
it's kind of frowned upon.
Right. And I mean, they were saying gross things, like she'd go into the room to like clean it or gather sheets, and she'd find like a bowl of vomit under the bed and like clear drug paraphernalia around. So just not cool.
Bye. Get out of my house.
I know, right? So anyway, he did end up, after an incident where Jason came home incredibly high, and Ryan thought it was someone breaking into the house, and he like had a gun and went to pull it on him, and Jason's just like crawling down the hall high off his ass. He's like, okay, this is done. He calls his boss and he tells Jason's boss, this guy has a problem. He's using his corporate credit card to buy shit and return it for cash so he can go buy drugs. Like, we got to do something about it.
Wow, good for him.
Yeah, right. And I mean, I think he must have had an inkling of what would happen, because the boss basically was like, you can keep your job if you go to rehab.
Right.
So Jason goes to Ryan, is like, yeah, I got into rehab. I decided on my own to go. Meanwhile, Ryan's like, yeah, you decided.
Right.
Basically, you had no choice. But of course, in a last hurrah, he decides he wants to just get totally high. So he rents a truck, shows up to Ryan's with Eldon in the car. So little itty bitty Eldon is in this truck, Guy's high off his ass. And so Ryan's like, I gotta intervene here. He's like, hey, let's go to the Motel 6. Like, you guys need your own private space. It's on me. So he rents a room. What happens? Jason goes in the bathroom and starts making his cocaine into crack, which I didn't know was a thing until I actually read how you made it due to this case. So he's doing that and just so high that he just sits and waits for him to pass out, and then he leaves because he doesn't want Jason driving with Eldon in the car.
Right.
Little does he know, though, first thing that happens, Jason wakes up in the morning, puts Eldon in the car, and drives in this rental car on the corporate card.
Hold on. So the dude left the little
He
kid
did.
there for
I
the
don't
night?
like that. I wish he just took him and left a note. Like, I have Eldon.
Like, have a good night's sleep
I
with your dad
know.
passed out on drugs and get some dinner on
Yeah,
your own
and I mean, while
4-year-old.
I think Ryan has like good intentions, I think there's a lot of fucked up things happening in all of these people's lives.
Right.
They're not all perfect,
Right.
clearly. But yeah, so he gets
Gross.
Eldon in the car, he drives, and what does he do? He runs into a parked van and then takes off. There are witnesses everywhere. So the police track him down. Again, he's fucking getting away with it. I don't think the police knew Eldon was in the car with him. So he's just getting busted for a hit and run, but he could have
Not driving
killed
under
his
the
son.
influence or child endangerment.
Exactly. So, I mean, and keep in mind, this is all while he's left Amanda. So Amanda's like has her own drinking problems and the center of her world has left her. I mean, he's also a pile of shit as well, moving into one of his mother's rental properties in Eugene. He has kids on the weekend. Like, it's not great in both households. So like I said, Jason takes the kids on the weekends to Eugene. And this is where he's usually with his mother, but I know he lives in one of her rental properties. Not long after, Amanda starts suspecting that Jason's having an affair. So she's like driving to Eugene to creep on him. At one point, there's this.
Even though they're broken up?
Well, they're not divorced. They're just, he basically told her, if you lose weight and stop drinking, we can get back together. So she's like thinking there's hope at this point.
Right.
So she goes down, and there's the saddest story about at Christmas time. She drives down there and just watches Christmas from outside the house because they won't let her in. The grandma lets her in to wash her hand because she cut it slipping on the ice, but they just don't let her in. So she sits in her car the whole night and watches Christmas from the window. Like, how fucking sad is that?
Yeah.
Excuse my language. So anyway, yeah. So she's like, you're having an affair. I know you're seeing your ex-girlfriend. And he's like gaslighting her, like, no, we're just friends. She's going through this awful divorce. I'm trying to be there for her. She can't have kids. So I bring the kids around to make her feel better. And even his mom is like, no, they're just old friends, but they dated in high school. So anyway, we find out later they were in fact dating. And at Amanda's trial, little home slice shows up with him. And then they tell everyone that they're engaged. So it's just like, rub salt into that wound. Like, clearly you were telling her she was crazy, but she was onto you. Anyway, off topic. So Amanda at this time is still desperately trying to get him back, trying to lose weight, trying to show him that she's not drinking, that her life's together. So she invites his friends, Ryan and Sarah, over for a dinner party. Now, during this time, she's cooking. She thinks it's going to go well, and then just forgets to cook the food.
Oh, I hate when I do that.
Ryan goes out to buy some, like, I don't know, pasta or something and come back. But by the time he gets back, she's toasted. So her plan fails. They, of course, are relaying to Jason everything that happens. So it's just not going anywhere. And then just icing on the cake, she gets the kids back and they say, Dad's new girlfriend is skinnier than you. Just gets her right where it hurts because she's clearly has an eating disorder and she's not big. You guys, she's like average sized girl.
Right.
Like, yes, she goes up and down in her weight, but that's life, right? Yeah, it's just horrible. And that is not something kids say on their own.
No, he trained them for that.
I mean, my daughter thinks Julie and I are the exact same size. Like, kids don't see that at all.
Or let alone to relay it.
Yeah.
To be like, oh, we found it very important that you know this.
Yeah, so it's clearly something they picked up on Dad saying. Fast forward a little bit further, Amanda ends up giving sole custody of Gavin to his biological father in February of 2009. So
Hallelujah.
This is great. This is the best thing she could have done, but it was very concerning to the family. Like, the only person on her side about this was her Grandma Jackie, and Grandma Jackie knew something was going on with her. And there's like some people thinking maybe she just didn't want Gavin anywhere near Jason. because he acts like his biological father, but he's abusive to him. And Gavin like is in this shell and kind of like has a hiding place at home, and she just wants to, get him to a safe place. And the whole time that these last few years at this point, the dad, Nathan, and his wife, Chelsea, are fighting really hard for more time with Gavin. So even though she kept saying no, no, no for about a year, she just gives sole custody, and
Right.
they like grab it and run with it. And so they do let him see her, but it's his choice. So that's why Gavin didn't go with her that night.
Oh, good.
Because he just wasn't feeling it. And there's actually a comment in the book that when she came to pick him up, he went and hid in this hiding place. It was like behind the couch, there was a cabinet, and he would go in there when he wanted to be alone, which is kind of a concerning thing in itself, coping.
For sure.
But, I'm sure he's got his own guilt because of that, because he's 11 at the time. But I don't know, better off without her, I guess. She gives the custody papers over to his parents now, Nathan and Chelsea, and the family wasn't on their side, but they moved on from it. And by March that year, she finally filed for legal separation from Jason. So she did that. He didn't do that. So they've been separated for over a year, and she finally went ahead and did that. But she also filed a protective order of restraint against him. And this is because at some point he had wouldn't let her leave the house. It's like pinning her down, holding her wrists. But this is where it gets a little weird. So the judge actually says custody can't be determined until we go through mediation or court, but allows Jason to take the kids to Eugene. So he enrolls Trinity in a school there. But somehow Amanda gets her hands on some sort of court order because she shows up at the Eugene school with her sister and a police officer and takes Trinity with her. So anyway, she pulls Trinity and rolls her back into Tualatin, and then a few days later, the judge grants temporary custody to Jason. So now she has nothing but weekend visitation. She's lost the love of her life. She's lost her kids most of the time, and now she has to wait for Jason to give her permission to have her weekends with him, with the kids, rather.
Which it's surprising. Like, she must have been in bad shape because so often custody goes to the mother.
And that's what her family was telling her. They're like, you just got to keep it together because it's rare that they're going to take custody from the mother.
And then the fact that she has like this order of restraint and stuff. And it's like, isn't that a sign of...
Well, and at this time, she's going in and out of rehab herself. So she's in a severe depression that her family recognized. So they would put her in rehab. She'd last a week. She'd check herself out or she'd get kicked out. It was one of these scheduled visitations that Amanda's actions changed everything for her entire family. Gavin, Trinity, and Eldon were all at Amanda's parents' house when she drove over to pick them up for the Rose Festival evening. 11-year-old Gavin chose not to go and retreated into his hiding place in the house. Trinity and Eldon went with their mother, and we know how that story ends.
Kind of interesting that it obviously had to happen then. That it wasn't about the kids per se. You know, she wasn't like, Gavin has to go, or I'll wait until there's a time he wants to go and we're all there.
I'm so torn on it. It's like,
or
maybe
because
she
he's not biologically
Jason's kid.
Yeah. So it's interesting that she had the wherewithal to be like, oh, that's fine because these are my targets.
Yeah. I mean, and the police are saying, it was clearly an act against Jason. But she's also saying she has nothing left to live for. And does any mother want to leave their kids without them? So I'm torn between it being an act of revenge on the spouse or that altruistic love where she can't fathom a life without her children. So it's very back and forth. And I feel like it was just kind of written off. No, everyone was okay with it being against Jason. She was getting back at him. But the thing is, she loved him. She could not picture a life without him. Her world revolved around him.
Right.
So I'm kind of lost on that. Amanda is living out her life sentence at Coffee Creek Correctional Facility in Wilsonville. So that's just outside of Portland. And she will have an option for being paroled in her 60s. She doesn't give interviews. Everyone tries. She won't even engage with people. I think through a friend, she talked to Nancy Rommelman just to tell her to back off. She has tried to reach out to Gavin on multiple occasions, and the only time he ever really wrote to her was to ask her to allow his stepmother to adopt him. So Chelsea is incredibly involved in his life. That's who he lived with growing up. He ended up, I think, going to the military and he ended up talking to Nancy as an adult, I guess 17 or 18, and just saying, like, it is what it is. He wishes he could see Trinity more. The saddest part of this story for me, other than Eldon dying, is the family squabbling has made it impossible for Trinity and Gavin to be siblings.
Yeah, so where did Trinity end up?
Trinity ended up with her dad. So he married the ex-girlfriend.
Oh, gross.
I think her name was Kelly or something.
So everyone, because of the trials and stuff, everyone knows their history and knows how he is as a person and a dad.
Just okay with it.
And go, okay,
so
here's your kid.
Chelsea and Nathan went to the courts, and there's a whole chapter on this in the book, but they basically were like, please allow Trinity to have regular visitation with Gavin, and we fully support you having custody of her, but you have to let her see him. And it was like a phone call and then nothing. They FaceTimed like 4 years after the fact. He had to sneak her a present when they were doing a dedication to a new speedboat for the city of Portland. They got a new rescue boat, and they did a dedication to Eldon and Trinity, and he snuck her like a little gift because he missed her so much. Like, they were tight. They were besties. So that to me is just horrible that families would, be so selfish as to not let these kids see each other just for pure hatred of each other. And I hope that's changed. So I think Trinity's 17 now. I did find her on Facebook, but of course it's like a closed account and she's a child, so we can't talk to her. But I would imagine that the minute she turns 18, they will change that. But maybe they're talking now since she's a teenager. It's just really sad.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, you mentioned Diane Downs, but that she had that second child that she put up for adoption.
Yeah, it is.
And it's
it
like,
seems
so
like
here's this other child that, like,
somewhere
do they
out there.
know
Probably not
what their mom did? Like,
no, it depends on that. I hope not.
Yeah,
but at the same time, like, they're very distinctive looking children. So Trinity and Eldon look just like their mom, and they have the cutest little noses. So I mean, if you saw that face, you'd be like, whoa, you're my sibling. Because they look just like mom.
That's wild.
Anyway, I hope that they're living without so much pain of this, but I imagine it's very hard to lose someone so close to both of you and not be able to lean on each other. So,
well, and that it was your mom. So you lost your mom and your sibling.
And I don't think they think of her as a mom. So I honestly think Trinity's probably not got a lot of these memories because it was so traumatic. But Gavin, in the interview he did with Nancy, makes it very clear that she's just a person, not his mother.
Mm-hmm.
So. And that's the story of Amanda Jo Stottsmith. For anyone needing help for postpartum depression, please call 1-800-944-4773 or visit www.postpartum.net.
Postpartum, not talked about enough. It is, but it's not.
It's becoming less of this horrible thing, and people and celebrities talk about it now, which makes it like, okay.
I feel like it's being untabooed, but in a very lighthearted way.
Yes.
Like
I'm sad.
Everyone has postpartum. Like, it's now we all talk about it.
So
and it's great. And it's
I actually had a coworker who she was very open about her postpartum depression. And she told me the reason I know I needed to go to the doctor and get help is I was holding my baby, whose name happened to be Gavin, oddly enough. She said, I wonder what it would sound like if I dropped him and his head hit the concrete. And that's when she knew she needed to get help. So
good for her.
I hope people know that those thoughts are not normal and that it's okay to get help, because you don't want to end up with untreated
this
disease.
Is like not postpartum because the kid was 4,
but I mean depression.
She probably, so growing up, I'm sure she had her own trauma, and then trauma of all these relationships and young mom,
and not dealing with the death of your fiance could have contributed.
Right. And
her
if
friends
she
are always
probably
like,
had postpartum from
son?
the first kid, and then that was never dealt with, and then she gets knocked up immediately. Now her hormones are all over the place. And then you get this fiance who then kills himself
and treats you like crap,
and you
after
literally
that, your next boyfriend.
Yeah, you literally don't process that because you're pregnant. The amount of time of being pregnant and then losing someone and then being with someone else, like, that's not enough time.
I know.
To process a death.
Yeah.
And then it's like, and now it's this new guy and he's awful and we're awful to each other, and addiction issues and all
And
this stuff.
her family tried with rehab. I mean, I feel really bad for everyone involved because people did make an effort. They saw she was suffering. And she did have a friend who feels really bad because she wasn't answering her calls after she made some scene at a party or whatever. And the last message was like, I really wish you would call me back. I'm having a really hard time right now. It's just like she calls for help over and over. And then this happened. Just the worst possible thing. Wah, wah, wah. Roughly 2.5% of all homicide arrests. The thought that a person could kill their own children is unfathomable for most people. Our children. Did I say it really weird?
Yeah.
I knew I
think
did.
you might have said...
There's a little jarble.
Unfathomable.
You might have said children also.
Children are unfathomable.
You basically didn't speak English.
And in this book, she dives deep into the story. That was wrong.
They're having a tickle.
That wasn't a nice
They're having a tickle
I think
party.
that was her, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, I went over to watch it. That was her, I think, yeah.
Those cheeks. Always squeaking.
I'm looking forward to a musical about Napoleon. That's my dream.
He was short. He had little
He
man
wasn't short.
syndrome.
He was average.
He was average height, but everyone hated him. So he's known as being short. Short guy, short guy, short guy. He's so little he fits in your hand. Short guy, short guy, short guy. He's coming to take over your land. Napoleon!
Okay. Can we just finish this?
Can we?
I don't know. Where did I fuck up? It's from a well-off family. He's already done multiple steps. He's already done.
Already done. Multiple steps in the...
I'm going to buy
in the
my
prison.
horse tranquilizers from England.
He's already done horse tranquilizers.
And then there was another one that was like, too bad you used her book. Heck.
Murder in the Rain is produced and edited by Josh McCullough. Written and hosted by Emily Rowney and Alisha Holland. Artwork by Jamie Costa. Music by Kai Pfeiffer at kyfifer.com. Check out our website, murderintherain.com, for additional information on all cases, a fun interactive map, and be sure to subscribe so you can receive our newsletter. Check out the Mad Props page for coupon codes from some of our sponsors. We love your reviews and seeing them on all streaming platforms, especially iTunes. And check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And suck my balls.
Please put that in.